Following Randy Orton's epic heel turn last week, what did Randy Orton have to say this week for his actions? Plus, we had a very unexpected heel turn on the road to WrestleMania. We'll give our thoughts on that. And we had some jelly roll on this show as well. A lot of jelly roll, actually. So all that and a lot more coming up on this week's episode. Welcome back to Wrestling Brother Talk Smack. I am your host, Jarvis Sam. Before you do anything else, like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell so that you are up to date each and every time we drop new content on this channel. Also, let's keep this conversation flowing throughout the week on my socials. On TikTok, you can follow me on TikTok, Wrestling Brother on TikTok, as well as Instagram, I am Wrestling Brother. Without further ado, let's talk about this week's show. So this week's show was mainly centered around 3 letters. RKO. Randall Keith Orton. So we know last week during the contract signing with Cody Rhodes, he had an epic heel turn that in many ways has turned him more babyface, and we'll get into more of that as the show progresses. But the big question coming in is, why did Randy do what Randy did? On Monday Night Raw, we saw him on the phone as Michael Cole was supposed to have a segment interviewing him, but we see him wherever he was at. I guess he was at home, with one of the worst cameras I've ever seen. I mean, he had to be shooting this thing on an iPhone 4 at this point, but he's on the phone with somebody, and he's looks like somebody is going to have his back here. And there's so much speculation as to who it could be. And once you have an angle like this, the conspiracy theories go through the window, right? You're like, oh, it's probably Dwayne. It's not Dwayne. It ain't The Rock. Like, let's not go there. It's not The Rock. That there's, it could be Bob Orton, Randy's dad. Ted DiBiase Jr. recently got acquitted on his fraud case. So, hey, legacy explodes. That could make sense. Last photos I've seen of Ted DiBiase, he ain't ready he's in no ring shape. So if it's for some sort of angle leading to the ring, absolutely not. But if it's for an appearance, maybe. But I mean, I don't know if he'll, you know, I don't know if he's a ratings draw, but it could tie into the history of the 3 of these men. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. I'm hoping it's Kevin Owens. That's the thing that makes the most sense, and that could, potentially carry us into some good storytelling beyond WrestleMania 42. Well, I believe it's at the top of the second hour. Randy Orton comes out. We see him, and he's out there to give his take on why he did what he did. Randy Orton got a major reaction. And if you've been watching my show, I've been saying, when you turn Randy Orton heel, you're only going to turn him more babyface, because he's going to be the version of Randy Orton that the fans have been clamoring for many, many years. And now he's finally back. Well, he comes out and, he talks about how, he's enjoyed his time, with the fans and, signing autographs and being that guy, but, it's not really who he is. And, and it's not what he wants his legacy to be remembered for. He wants his legacy built on winning championships. And he knows that being that version of Randy Orton is the one that gets things done. And that's the version he needs going into WrestleMania to defeat Cody Rhodes. And he feels that Cody Rhodes gave him the green light to be that guy. So he says, hey, we're still friends, but this is who I need to be to win the championship. So, first of all, I'm glad we didn't I was a little worried, especially when he starts talking about, the autographs. I was hoping he didn't have one of those John Cena-like promos where he just flips the script on the fans, because I'm sorry, Randy Orton's character has never been built on fanfare. It's always been built on being the Viper. And so it didn't really make sense for him to flip the script on the fans, but he did a good job of kind of bringing everything together. Later in the show, we see him backstage. He's talking with Jelly Roll. He's kind of apologized to Jelly Roll, like, it's nothing against you. And then Jelly Roll gives him this pep talk about how, this is not the Randy Orton he knows. The Randy Orton he knows has a heart and is a good person. He's not even mad at him for what he did last week, but it's just not the person he knows. He's into redemption stories, that he's been redeemed and this, that, and everything else. And it seemed like it was something that Randy Orton was actually processing in his mind. And I forgot to mention that earlier he had a run in also with Matt Cardona. Randy Orton had a run in with Matt Cardona that, Matt Cardona was kind of like questioning him about what he did, and he's better than that and whatnot. And, Randy Orton pretty much told him, look, man, you're nothing. Like, why don't you go play with some action figures, and just kind of, belittled him a bit. Matt Cardona then asked for a match with Randy Orton to Nick Aldis. Nick Aldis is like, nah, that's not happening. I don't want to jeopardize WrestleMania and whatnot. But anyway, during the interaction with Jelly Roll, he says, hey, tonight I am going to, later tonight I'll make it right with Matt Cardona. And you could tell they were saving that for the end. So you knew what was about to happen. But anyway, he had their interaction with Jelly Roll, and there's more Jelly Roll coming after in the next couple of segments of the show. But the final segment of the show featured Randy Orton calling out Matt Cardona. He kind of gives him an apology and says, hey, you know what? I made the action figure joke. He's like, hey, I'm a gamer, so I get that culture. And, I was wrong for saying that and all that. And then, boom, he gives him a low blow and beats the living crap out of Matt Cardona. Inside the ring, outside the ring, just chaos, absolute chaos. And it was it was what it needed to be. But for this to be a heel turn, the crowd was going berserk for Randy Orton. They wanted one more time. After he'd already beat the guy's ass within an inch of his life, they're chanting for him to do it one more time. It was almost like when Brock Lesnar had one of those returns and he came and he F5 somebody and then he's about to leave and then the crowd's going one more time. It's that same exact type of feel. And that's what they left you with. So Randy Orton doubled down his heel turn, but again, double down on this heel turn has thus made him the biggest baby face on the show. That was hands down the best thing on the show. There's some other good things on the show. It wasn't. This show definitely wasn't as bad as some of the worst SmackDowns, but to say that we are on the road to WrestleMania, it just doesn't feel that way. It feels like they are relying on top 4 or 5 matches to carry the card, and everything else is just in limbo. We saw a ton of Jelly Roll tonight. I don't mind Jelly Roll. I don't mind entertainers, especially entertainers that actually love the business, enjoy the business, understand the business. I don't mind them on the show. But I do mind them having more of a clear path to WrestleMania than some of the stars that we don't have a clear path for, and we're a mere 4 weeks out. I see a vision for Jelly Roll more than I see a vision for Gunther. I see a vision for Jelly Roll more than I see a vision for LA Knight. I see more of a vision for Jelly Roll than I do Iyo Sky. It shouldn't be that way. It really shouldn't be that way. A celebrity appearance should be like the icing on the cake, right? And it's like I'm going to get into it, but Jelly Roll's going to be in action next week on SmackDown. Like, the Jelly Roll is literally like weekly television talent now, because he's going to be in action next week on SmackDown, and we'll get into that. The second biggest thing on the show was probably Jacob Fatu and Drew McIntyre. Going in, we were told that we would get a match between those two. Let me tell you, that did not happen. The show kicked off with those two. They're back. There's a parking lot, and one car looks like a car T-boned another car, and it's Jacob and Drew, and they are just absolutely going at it. Jacob Fatu is bleeding like crazy to kick off the show, and for years and years, especially during that PG era, you had moments, stretches for almost years where you didn't see anybody get any color. And in back to back weeks, we've gotten color. I'm not opposed to it, but let's not overdo it now, right? It should still feel special, right? When this happens. But if I'm not mistaken, well, I'm not, and I know I'm not mistaken because the segment that closed the show last week was Cody Rhodes laying on those stairs, bleeding like crazy. And then we kick off this week's episode of SmackDown with Jacob Fatu now bleeding. Well, following that, Drew McIntyre comes to the ring. There's a back and forth between him and Nick Aldis per usual. And then Jacob Fatu comes out again. We thought we were done with Jacob Fatu. Nope. They start brawling again. So we know we are on some type of collision course between these two, that maybe it ends up in a Hell in a Cell. Maybe it's a no disqualification match. Maybe it's a falls count anywhere type situation based on what the story is that they're telling. They're going to need something that's going to contain these two, because it's going to be a brawl, and every day this is a blood feud. They hate each other. you know, at this point, at some like, when are they gonna just reveal that Drew McIntyre is the one that destroyed Jacob Fatu and had him out of action at the end of last year? That they could just go with that at this point to solidify this blood feud, but they haven't. They also closed the show. The closing segment was the Randy Orton chaotic segment with Matt Cardona, but the final frame, we have Drew McIntyre and Jacob Fatu out back outside the arena, and they are on like some elevated space, and they are brawling on top of it, and they literally both knock each other off of that and pretty much fall to their demise as SmackDown goes off the air. So this is clearly, at least these two have a direction for what their path to WrestleMania is going to look like. And again, that was probably the two biggest things on the show. This was kind of a thread throughout the show. Both the Randy thing and this with these two were kind of common themes and thread throughout the show, which I love. I love when our shows have the threading, when you have a storyline that you start off the show with it and then you kind of revisit it throughout the show. That makes for good television, and it makes for good feuds. It's not just one and done. Like, okay, we got the Drew McIntyre segment out the way. Now it's on to the MFTs. No, it needs to continue. That was something that the WWE got right during the Attitude Era. They got that portion of it right. You may start off the show with Steve Austin going to jail or going to the hospital or something, and then you keep revisiting it. You keep revisiting that story. And then it climaxes at the end, pause, when Austin's now out of jail and he shows up as, the corporation is high-fiving and celebrating, thinking they've neutralized this enemy. And there we go. We now have Austin in the building. So this type of storytelling works. We had a heel turn. We had a very unexpected heel turn. Don't know how I feel about it. It's almost 24 hours later, and I really don't know how I feel about it. Jade Cargill comes out and is immediately followed. Her outfit was like the star of the show. There was Randy Orton and then Jade Cargill's outfit. Those were the two stars of the show. I digress. She comes out. No sooner she comes out, This Is My Brutality hits, and here comes Rhea Ripley. And they have their usual back and forth. I'm that bitch, and you're a bitch, and bitch, bitch, bitch. Like, where, drop as many bitch bombs as you can in a segment. And, Rhea's like, I'm done talking. What do you want to do? And, Rhea's like, I'll even give you the first punch. And then Jade kind of thinks about it and she's like, no, we'll do it on my time. She exits the ring. As she exits the ring, B-Fab and Michin, who she has had a feud with pretty much most of her title run. And it looks like Jade is now cornered. Are you going to have a fight with Rhea? Or are you going to have a fight with us? Well, Jade then turns her back to Michin and B-Fab. And then they walk as a unit back to the ring and surround Rhea and beat the crap out of Rhea. So there appears to be alignment and maybe a new faction that Jade is going to lead. It's going to be Jade, B-Fab, and Michin. After everything we've seen between these three, this is where we're at. So B-Fab and Michin effectively turn heel and join the side with Jade Cargill and beat the living crap out of Rhea Ripley. It is what it is. It's something. It's something different. At least we got a little bit of physicality in this rivalry that's supposed to be super heated. We'll see where it goes. Jelly Roll. I'll tell you we get here. Kit Wilson was supposed to call out Jelly Roll. He does. Jelly Roll comes out, and Jelly Roll, like, they have a back and forth. Eventually, he says, you want to have a rap battle? And Kit Wilson says, I'm above rappers. They're beneath me. And he'd rather do like some spoken word. So he has some spoken word for Jelly Roll. And I'll be honest, Kit Wilson cooked. Kit Wilson absolutely cooked Jelly Roll. Like, he cooked him. Talked about his weight loss, talked about not being able to find his wee-wee. So then Jelly Roll. This was a segment, you should probably go back and watch if you didn't see it. Kit Wilson was pretty good here. But then Jelly Roll, of course, it's his turn to have a rebuttal. And, one of the lines that Kit Wilson used was something along the lines of, like, hopefully since you've lost weight, now you can find your wee-wee or your willy or whatever he calls it. And Jelly Roll, in his rebuttal, he basically said that, he never had a problem because his mom could find it for him. And then Jelly Roll has this line where he says that his fat used to be, like pounding against Kit Wilson's mom. And just like, okay, Jelly Roll, like, that's a bit much, Jelly Roll. Ultimately, they have a match set up for next week on SmackDown. Yes, Jelly Roll is going to be in action next week on SmackDown against Kit Wilson. Now, more than likely, this was where we'll get more development into what the direction is going to be for Jelly Roll at WrestleMania. But clearly, Jelly Roll is going to have a place on this card, and it's going to probably be some sort of tag team match because there's no way they're featuring Jelly Roll in a tag team match. And as I mentioned last week, the rumored match is Jelly Roll and Royce Keys versus Kit Wilson and The Miz. So I would assume that next week the match turns into something where Kit Wilson gets help from The Miz and then unexpected return of Royce Keys. We haven't seen him since the Royal Rumble, but we'll probably see him next week. And then, of course, Nick Aldis is probably going to make it official. So yeah, those were your 3 to 4 biggest things on the show. There were some other things on the show. We got Carmelo Hayes and Ilya Dragunov for the 100th time for the U.S. Championship. And yet again, Carmelo Hayes comes up victorious. Whatever. We got a tag team title change. The MFTs took on the newly formed team of Damian Priest and R-Truth. Makeshift tag team defeats MFTs. We did see a little bit of friction backstage with the MFTs. I was about to call them the Timu Bloodline. The same thing. When Tama Tonga told Solo Sikoa he's starting to sound a lot like Roman. So we'll see where this leads us. You know, if nothing else, it got the tag titles off of the MFTs. There is now tension amongst the MFTs. So maybe this is going to lead into some dissension that maybe leads to this group separating, splitting up, disbanding. Who knows? There's also rumors that the entire bloodline is going to rally behind Roman because of the whole family thing. The last thing I need is to see Talatonga and Tongaloa standing next to the tribal chief. But whatever. We got Sami Zayn versus Aleister Black. Now, this was interesting. There was a segment backstage between Sami Zayn and Trick Williams. Clearly, they're going to be opponents at WrestleMania. I love this for both of them. It gives them something to do. It gives them both. You know, Sami Zayn is one of those guys that, you know, you give him lemons, he will make lemonade out of it. So this is absolutely a great position for Trick Williams for his first opponent at WrestleMania. Trick Williams does need to win that match, of course. Well, anyway, Sami Zayn invited Trick to watch the match, or maybe Trick invited himself. I think Trick invited himself, actually. And Trick was the most over one in that segment, of course. There was, you know, he was standing on top of the announcer's desk and, you know, whooped that Trick. Well, because of his distraction, Aleister Black got a big win over Sami Zayn. I like that. I like that going in. I like the fact that one, you got a big win for Trick Williams last week, and then you then get him out in this segment, and then Sami Zayn actually gets a loss, and Aleister Black gets the win. Aleister Black can use as many wins as he can get going into whatever he's got going on. I mean, there's obviously no clear path for him, but you know, he could use wins. His character needs to be booked strong. But yes, ultimately, this was helping build the feud between Trick Williams and Sami Zayn, which will be a Mania match. And I am much looking forward to that Mania match. We got the Irresistible Forces versus the Bella Twins. This was Brie Bella's first match outside of the Royal Rumble since, I believe, 2018, 2019. This match sucked. Absolutely sucked. Was very short. Charlotte and Alexa were invited to watch ringside, and they weren't there in the beginning as the commentary pointed out, but then they did show up, and of course they factored into the ending of the match. Because of course they did. Their match got thrown out last week because of interference by the Bella Twins. So why would they not return the favor, which is exactly what they did. And we know this is leading to some sort of multi-women tag team match at WrestleMania. Let's just get there. Let's just get there. Outside of that, that's all that there is to report on the show, guys. It, you know, if we were booking for or building towards, say, Saturday night's main event, this will be good. You know, you got your major little feuds that are going to get paid off at that, and then everything else is filler. But we are building to a 2-night WrestleMania in Las Vegas that you're having trouble selling tickets to. Why is there not more urgency around filling up this freaking card? It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. Back to my earlier point. Why am I more confident in what I think Jelly Roll is going to be doing at WrestleMania than I am with what Gunther's going to be doing, Iyo Sky? There's so many people. LA Knight, even Seth Rollins. We don't have a clear path for any of these people, but yet we know what our celebrity spot's going to be. There should be a lot more urgency around filling up the rest of this card with things that we care about, building things that we care about. But when you give us this makeshift tag team crap and, you know, just, it does not feel, this is what everybody is criticizing when it comes to the product, is that we are less than a month away from WrestleMania, and I don't know that it feels like WrestleMania. If it weren't for Punk and Roman, if it weren't for Cody and Randy, would it really feel like we're building toward WrestleMania? If you took those two matches literally out of the equation, and you're now just left with Jade and Rhea, you're left with Jacob and Drew, does it really feel like we're building to the biggest show of the year? No. Maybe a Clash in Paris? Yeah, absolutely. We're building to that. Maybe we're building to Backlash. But it doesn't even feel like we're building to SummerSlam and we're building to WrestleMania. It's a problem. It's a huge problem. WWE's got a little bit of work to do. Now, I'm going to give credit where credit is due. The things that are really kind of locked in are kind of doing okay. You know, I have no problem with what's going on with Cody and you know, well, not Cody, with Roman and Punk. I know some people didn't like the promo from Monday night, but I'll be honest, I think it did what it needed to do. It was another typical back and forth between those two, but I think it added a layer to the story that I think a lot of people are missing. If you know anything about CM Punk, he doesn't have the thickest of skin, right? And so Roman poked the bear and got him to get out of his character, which is what he wanted to do. It's exactly what he wanted him to do. And all it took was for him to call him old, when Roman isn't that far behind him. So all it took for him to get out of character was to call him old, even though he did talk shit about his wife and all of that. But he didn't even have to go with the Larry stuff that everybody wanted him to build with and was expecting for him to actually say. He didn't even go there. Called him old. And then that got him out of character. It's perfectly fine. We know next time this is going to get way more physical because Punk did swing on Roman and landed a shot. Randy and Cody. Cody's going to be on SmackDown next week. It's going to be heated. I do believe they could possibly be setting the stage for some sort of double turn at Mania with Cody and Randy. Bookmark that. You need to bookmark that because that might get revisited night one of WrestleMania. Could be wrong, but if you really look at a lot of the subtle things and the storytelling that they're telling, and especially once we see what happens next week, I think we're gonna get some more layers because Cody's gonna come in and now he's gonna feel like he has to tap into another side of Cody Rhodes that he's never tapped into to beat his former mentor. Because you're not gonna be facing and squaring off against, you know, blue shirt, kid friendly shirt wearing Randy Orton. You are stepping into the ring, the Orton that hears the voices and the Viper. So Cody's going to have to do a little bit of soul searching to possibly top that. And he might have to tap into an evil side of himself that we never thought we'd see. The other thing is, Cody's going to get booed next week. And Randy's going to get cheered. So I hope WWE sees what they have and are tracking with what's going on, because if you want to really tell a great story that your older fan base is really gonna be latching on to and talking about for weeks and weeks after Mania, that's what you have to do. That's what you have to do. Outside of that, Drew and Jacob is fine. Drew and Jacob is absolutely fine. It's heated. It's all that. Cool. I don't know if it feels like WrestleMania. I don't know. It's good, but does it feel like Mania? I don't know. But at least it's something. Jade and Rhea, they've got a ways to go. You know, the Michin B-Fab thing feels a little forced, a little out of nowhere. You didn't build up to this. Whatever. I think Rhea and Jade are both able to stand on their own. And this feud could be heated just with those two alone. But I'm going to let it play out and trust the process. Anyway, that's this week's episode of Wrestling Brother Talk Smack. If you enjoyed the content, like and subscribe, hit the notification bell because I'll be back next week with another episode. Also, follow me on socials. That's Wrestling Brother on TikTok and I Am Wrestling Brother on Instagram. Also, if you want WWE merch like this nice championship belt I got behind me, click that affiliates link below and you can get that. Yeah, it's the same stuff that you get on WWEshop.com because it is the link to WWEshop.com. But through our link, you get to support us and help us provide more and more better content for you and for your viewing pleasure. And as always, thank you for joining this week where we don't pop for the moments, we analyze the moments. And hopefully next week I have a better show to report on because WWE's got a long way to go. Y'all have a good week.